So welcome back, everybody. This is the official Smackdown part of the session where no holds bar, we say what we want. I try to get these guys in trouble. Is there any media here? Anyone press? Anyone media? Anyone blogging? Anyone live streaming?
Or anyone that'll admit it?
Because we got legal clients who are watching. We got the chamber. All of the U.S. companies in the world are watching. Defense Department's watching. So what I'd like to do in this session is kind of, if you all watched the group, the show in the 70s and 80s, the McLaughlin group. You guys know what that is? You don't know what that is? So it's a this guy knows who it is. It's a talk show. It's kind of rapid fire, and the host of it, no matter what anybody said wrong, and we just kept going. So we'll be doing a little bit of fun like that. This is a topic that you kind of go to every conference on IoT or smart cities, the future of the world, and you'll see in PowerPoint slides and talks, cybersecurity is really important. And that's about it. We don't go the next level. We want to try to go the next level there with this group and this panel. As context, I got to tell you, I don't think our continued security and prosperity is assured. I've been working in this space in cybersecurity and national security for 20 plus years, and I'm really excited about the future as it pertains to the Internet of Things and smartness of being in cities. But that interconnectivity is now not just building strength and opportunity for citizens and communities, it's creating an incredible attack surface for malicious actors. Every connection that we make is a door you can walk in any direction. Although there's some innovators here are trying to change that. And not surprisingly, we got a lot of bad actors out there who are out there stealing intellectual property, stealing business plans and personal protected information. And we've seen over the last decade or so, I think it's the largest credit card breach in history, the largest computer worm in history. Actually, this is in the last 3 years. The largest denial of service in history, the largest ransomware attack ever, and the largest illicit transfer of wealth in history. And that's that's millions of victims across the globe. It's hundreds of nations, and it's cost billions, if not trillions of dollars in actual losses and operational and recovery costs. And we see the metastasis of threats from hackers to criminals. We see it across the vectors of infrastructure society. You look at Stuxnet, Saudi Aramco, and German steel mill, the Ukrainian electric grid. Different parts of our infrastructure are getting attacked, so they're no longer a theoretical concern, they're real. We're seeing the state actors. If you look between 2016 and 17 in the US and Qatar and Lebanon and elsewhere, something even more interesting, potentially nefarious, this introduction of cyber-enabled information operations that are the state actors weaponizing social media links with alternative reality that is in fact really attacking the foundations of our society. So there's a lot going on, and here to talk about it, the threats, the vulnerabilities, and the opportunities is our Smackdown crowd. And I'm going to have each one of them, I'm going to do this sort of rapid fire. Rapid fire, we mean, 30 seconds, 50 seconds, a minute. But let's start down with Tony, work our way back. Give just a quick background of who each is, because each of these guys are, because they have perspectives and things they can't say.
Hello, everybody. Tony Kim. I'm a partner, actually, at Orrick, Herrignton, and Sutfcliffe. We're so happy to host you all and to partner with Smart City Works. It's a great program. I'm the founder and co-leader of the global cyber privacy and data innovation practice here. We split our practice on the proactive, what we call cyber resiliency side. Our clients span the technology, financial services, and energy and infrastructure space. We also spend a lot of time, too much time, responding to cyber attacks and helping our clients navigate a whole host of compliance, statutory, contractual, legal issues, public disclosure issues, of course, regulatory investigations, class action litigation, and most importantly, frankly, to our clients, the brand and PR impacts that happen following major cyber attacks. We've been involved in Sony Pictures attacks, not the attack, the response to those attacks. Sony Pictures, Sony PlayStations, Home Depot, Yahoo, etc. And so we're very practiced. And so my perspective really comes at it from a lawyer. I am a lawyer, which makes me probably the least interesting person in this entire room. So thanks for having me on.
Tony, could you just tell us the one or two things you're not allowed to talk about?
I'm not allowed to talk about specific clients, and so if I give vague answers, it's because of that.
And thanks for answering the question. I was just really good. Matt, you're up.
Thank you. Thanks, Orrick. Tony, thanks for having me. It's a good week to talk about infrastructure, issues related to cyber and IoT in particular. So you'll catch me typically most Wednesdays with our cybersecurity working group, which has got about 200, some 200 companies, associations, state and local chambers, considering a bill or a regulation or a non-regulatory or non-legislative issue. We try to develop our thinking on and then make our advocacy pitch. Non-regulatory issues might be, let's say, our work related to the cybersecurity framework that NIST Industries put together. One other thing that we do a lot of is trying to get out to our state and local chambers. Colleagues and I are going to be in Charleston, South Carolina next week to talk about having a cyber plan and improving it. That's the one thing we really want our businesses and organizations of any stripe to have is a plan and know what you're going to do to respond to events, because they will happen. So that's much of what we do.
And great, and I will get back to you on the regulations that you're looking to impose on businesses downstream.
Sure thing.
Irv?
Thanks very much. Irv Lachow. I'm Deputy Director of Cyber Strategy and Execution at the Mitre Corporation. For those of you who aren't familiar with Mitre, it's a not-for-profit company that operates federally funded research and development centers. I'm also a visiting fellow at the Hoover Institution and a research associate at the Center for International Security and Cooperation, both of which are at Stanford.
Thank you, Irv. Irv, let me start with you. Top threats that we're facing today, in the context of the Internet of Things meeting the physical world and infrastructure, what are the top things you're concerned about?
So the one that I really want to focus on here is botnets, actually. So you mentioned the biggest botnet that we've seen in history recently, the Mitre botnet, which consisted of several 100,000 toasters, cameras, hair dryers, et cetera, et cetera. And it was pretty serious, right? So it was over a terabyte per second, brought down one of the domain name service providers, which then brought down a bunch of websites that we couldn't all get to. And the potential for IoT botnets to get much worse is really scary. So there's some malware out there called Reaper, and what makes Reaper really scary is what the Mitre malware did was it looked for devices that just had their default password, whatever it was, password or 1234 or blank or whatever. The Reaper malware actually, it's closer to actual hacking. So it actually looks for vulnerabilities in these devices and will hack its way into them, even if, find its way into them, even if the password is actually there and strong. So it's much more insidious. And right now, there are somewhere between 1 and 2 million devices that are infected but not active. So they're just sitting there waiting to be turned on, which again is pretty scary. So botnets created out of IoT devices is a very scary thing, and that can affect all of us, right? It can affect the internet infrastructure. The other thing to look at is those kinds of attacks, right? Those distributed denial of service attacks where you try to bring down the availability of a service or product, right? So you can't get to it, you can't use it. Those kinds of attacks can also be used against things like smart cities that are reliant on IoT devices. So the previous speaker talked about first responders, for example. So imagine an event like the bombing of the Boston Marathon. What happened in the aftermath, right? So all these first responders, getting people into hospitals and all that. Imagine if at that time, a bad person had decided to try to turn off all the street sensors, all the cameras, maybe the traffic lights, maybe even try to affect some of the medical devices in the hospitals. So imagine all that happening on top of this mass chaos of people trying to respond to this event, and it's pretty scary. So,
And how much does it cost to do a DDoS?
not very much. So there's a very robust business for renting botnets. So criminal enterprises are very professional at doing this. So they go out, they infect a bunch of machines, including probably some of ours in this room. And then you can go online, you can rent it out. They're very professional. They have customer service lines and all this kind of stuff. You can rent them by the hour, by the day, and go off and do all your next
Entrepreneurs
business.
out there, feel free, DDoS as a service is actually a real thing. It's a scary thing. Matt, what are you most concerned about?
So, we spend a lot of time with threats, but I think in a lot of ways, first let me talk about maybe just nation states, and then to the point about bots, I think it's a good example. So I think folks know that nation states probably have, at least in some form or fashion, perhaps the intent under certain circumstances and the ability to inflict damage on, let's say, critical infrastructure. Let's also talk about what we're trying to do, because I think that's really important, and I would want people to think about how their organizations can plug in. So one of the things that we are trying to think about in terms of dealing with botnets is we would really like to see comparable to, and I'm going to assume that most people here are aware of, at least on some level, the NIST cybersecurity framework. If anybody's not familiar with it, raise your hand. But I would think you are. We'd like to see something like that for managing IoT risks. The reason I think that would be key is because we would have trusted organizations like the National Institute of Standards and Technology, an arm of the Commerce Department, working with industry to come up with kind of a playbook of sorts, including standards, guidance, best practices. And NIST actually just did a great job